321 Old Homestead Highway. And in 2019, at the budget hearing and then at the town meeting, we asked the voters, hey, this is the location we've purchased. Kind of what do you think? Would you like to approve some money to prepare design? And that got over 60%. So since that process, or since that vote was approved, we had the property surveyed. We interviewed architects and hired a local architect, KCS Architects. In August, the group toured 3 recently constructed New Hampshire fire stations, which were Washington, Litchfield, and Warner. We had 8 focus meetings between August and December, either with the fire department or members of the public. Again, just going to show these pictures quick, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time. So we had an initial meeting in August with the fire department, talked about their priorities. In September, we talked about building construction and materials. September 24th, infrastructure, utilities, sustainability. October 3rd, forgot to take a picture. And we talked about community engagement, cancer and other health issues in the fire service. We talked about the existing building on 321 Old Homestead Highway. We considered initial site design and discussed ways to engage the community. We met again with the fire department in October, reviewed the draft floor plan. We met with the community, reviewed the draft floor plan. And then again in December, we had kind of a wrap up. We gave a similar overview of the work we had done. We had the cost information at that time, the design. So those were the 8 meetings we had this fall. So I'm not going to go into a ton of detail about all the different aspects. If people have specific questions, we can certainly answer them. But so the design we came up with, I'm just going to show some of these pictures, and we do have complete sets of the plans in the back if people want to review them. So this is kind of the profile view. This will be the top view is the view facing the street. This is the view from the bays. Again, the front view of the bays. Just brief view of the site. So this is Route 32. Entrance and exits. The bays are drive-through, as we'll see on the floor plan. Some parking for the public access, parking for the fire department, which will enter in this this rear entrance here. And then this is the floor plan. So we got 3 different main zones, which I'm going to dig into a little bit briefly. So there's the hot zone over here, which is red. Warm zone, which is the yellow. This is a mezzanine that the stairs are up here, so it has some mechanical stuff and some training area. And then the cold zone over here, so this is the training and meeting room, some bathroom facilities, a kitchenette area, some storage, and some offices for existing offices to replace what's in West Station, a conference room, radio room, paperwork room. So just to dig into each of those zones briefly. So the hot zone, this is what was on the left. It's really the only area that's in a lot of ways new. We don't have dedicated space like this in any of our stations. Our understanding of the importance of this area has progressed significantly. New Hampshire has a cancer presumption where a firefighter, based on certain aspects and certain different kinds of cancer or other health issues, if they develop those issues, it's presumed that it was based on their work in the fire service. So this area is really designed around addressing the largely call fire department's needs and trying to preserve their health and give them a safe and clean area to clean off after calls, to clean their gear, to store their gear. So that's the hot zone. This warm zone, the yellow area, so it's got 3 drive-through double deep bays, so either the trucks could come in this way and drive out, or they could be backed in and drive out either way. We'll leave that up to the firefighters and the fire chief to figure out. The existing station has 3 very tight bays, both in terms of the distance across and also the backing area. And all the stations we looked at, Warner, Litchfield, Washington, they all had these drive-through bays. And if you kind of look at the longest truck, which I think is this one here, it ends around here. So it's really, it is double deep in that you can put 2 trucks, but it's not double that longest length. So I think the architect said the 3 double deep was roughly equivalent to 5 bays across, and it gives more flexibility to put maybe a smaller truck between some of the larger trucks. We really expect that this space should address the bay needs in this part of town for the foreseeable future. If any other bays were needed, it would probably be in west or east. People have asked why the hot zone is on the left side here and there's not room to put on bays. We really can't foresee a need to do that any time in the immediate future. And the last zone here is the cold zone. So this meeting room, a smaller, inaccessible version, is in Station 2, which we're looking to replace. Yeah, I got that right, Station 2. So that'll be for training. They have monthly EMS training, monthly firefighter training. It'll also be used potentially during emergencies. It's cordoned off from the offices and the rest of the building, so it'll be able to be used for planning board, zoning board, select board, this type of meeting. So it would be cordoned off, like I said, and would be available for town use. Some bathroom space here, and then some offices to replace, as I mentioned, what's already in West. So there's a chief's office here, there's a chief's office in the new station, conference room, radio room, paperwork room. So it's a design which we can go back to if folks have questions or comments. But so just to summarize, go back to the cost. So the total cost is a $3.95 million. Includes all costs running the water line up from North Swanzey Water. Includes furniture, includes furniture or equipment for focused on cancer prevention. For the firefighters, got some contingency just in case, architectural and design expenses. We've identified at least $265,000 of possible grants, including the water line, some of the firefighter specific equipment. Inclusive costs around $300 per square foot. And so in terms of the bond we're looking at, it's a $3.5 million bond, partly from the undesignated fund balance, that area I mentioned earlier where the selectmen have worked to spend that down. It gives us some flexibility so we don't have to borrow the full amount. And in addition, we're proposing a partial 2020 general tax appropriation versus if the bond was approved and it had to pick up the payment in 2021, it's just appropriating it this year to get started towards it. That could go towards the design work, so we wouldn't have to bond for that immediately. And so the tax rate implication of that, so for the bond itself, would be about 40 cents per thousand if we went with a 20-year bond at an interest rate, which we think is higher than what we'd actually encounter. So we think this is high, but that's what the bond bank has quoted us, so that's what we're showing. And so if you look at like a $200,000 home, that's about an $80 increase to your tax bill for the year of the bond. So that'd be the 2021, be a lesser amount in 2020. So that's just a general overview of the process we went through, the design we came to, and the cost. I can jump back to any screen or answer any questions or comments. Maybe stick up the design if you want to have that up. So this would be the public hearing portion of the meeting. We will go around the room and ask everyone. No, just kidding. Yes, sir.
Good old Koshlet. I live at 138 Old Homestead Highway. I'm a little bit dubious about the presumption of firefighters suffering from cancer as a result of their employment. I worked in the hospital for 17 years as a volunteer. I saw over 7,000 patients here. In 17 years, I'm not a medical officer, but I know that I certainly spoke to a lot of medical people about the cancer ward in the hospital here. And certainly, I think the presumption that there is necessarily a higher incidence of cancer with firefighters could possibly be looked at in greater depth. I don't know to what degree you have, but in fact, the source of cancer is all over the place, and we read about it quite often. This food gives you a higher incidence of cancer. Physical activity of this type alleviates the possibilities. I think I would like to know a little bit more, frankly, about how the town suggests in this case that cancer is a higher incidence necessarily for firefighters that has to be funded through public funds.
That's a good question. We have some of our firefighters here. Eric, I don't know if you want to speak to that at all, or
Through the
Michael,
state is
about the
debating this
at the state level.
multitude of areas. So the state has said that it's presumed, you get cancer and you are a fireman, there are certain styles of cancer, certain types, I should say. It's not a broad spectrum of every cancer. There's certain types of cancer that, you know, related to the diesel fumes, related to the carcinogens in smoke that they know that are causes of it. So that's where that comes from.
Right, and so as Eric was mentioning, it was a state law, I think actually multiple state laws that where the legislature passed and the governor signed the cancer presumption from a workers' compensation perspective. So we haven't certainly commissioned any studies, but there's a number of different materials which I can provide to you. You know, it's not proof, it's drawing correlations, but they found higher incidences of certain types of cancer between the materials that are burning in homes now as opposed to when homes were mainly wood-based. Now there's different, you know, furniture and materials, so it's a number of different things, but I'm happy to share some of the information we've looked at with you.
Could I rejoin on that?
Of course.
I'm not going to dispute you. I'm certainly not an expert in this, but a lot of people across society get cancer. I've had personal contacts with people like that, certainly not at the hospital and certainly in my family. But in a lot of these cases, they don't know what causes it. Now, I'm just curious if a firefighter, and I'm not against firefighters, I had a fire that, not here in this town, but it was very well taken care of by firefighters. I have a lot of respect for them, as I do for the police. But if a person gets cancer, is it ipso facto assumed that that person's cancer was caused by relationship with their employment in the fire department?
From a workers' compensation standpoint, for some cancers, yes, that is the case, under New Hampshire law. Samir?
Samir Habibi, living on 24 Solis Crossing Road. I'm a bit shocked. We veterans had to fight the Veterans Administration 30 to 40 years to convince them Agent Orange, which is a solution, I think, got into us and gave us cancer. The presumption is enough. The presumption is enough. And thousands of Americans have died because there are those who would not accept that presumption, including from this town. But I think any presumption of cancer should be dealt with immediately and carefully, and certainly taxpayers should fund that.
Well, since this was directed to me, may I make a rejoinder?
Yes, sir.
I spent 3 years in Vietnam during the war, and I spent 3 years in Cambodia during the war. I was exposed to Agent Orange. I was exposed to an awful lot of hazards. I'm not suggesting that the government necessarily owes me a lifetime protection in all of the hazards that I was exposed to. So I only make this comment because this gentleman's comment was directed at me. So I leave it at that. Thank you very much.
I'd like to respond.
If it's of a general nature, I certainly don't want to.
Excuse me, I spent equal same time in Vietnam,
Thank you.
and I'm filled with Agent Orange, and it took the administration some 20 years to grant me 100%. And we had to convince and hard work. The presumption is what's important. Any presumption of any kind of a disease is critical for us to deal with and act on now. Thank you.
And thank you both for your service. Richard, yes.
Richard Scarinelli, Aldrich Road. Not to be argumentative about this, the issue is the fire station and whether it includes this component or not. But I think I would like to say that the fire department depends on volunteers. And I think it behooves us as a town, as a community, to take care of those who volunteer to take care of us. I presume there is a correlation, and perhaps a real causative one, between the kinds of exposures that firemen and other emergency responders are exposed to. Just today, I read a report from New York City drawing a strong correlation between those responders who went to 9/11 and their higher incidence of cancer rates and complications now 20 years later. So I don't have proof. I don't challenge this gentleman's conclusions. I think it behooves us as a community to take care of those who put their lives and put their health on the line to take care of us, and including this component makes sense to me.
Greg?
My name is Greg Johnson, live on Sawyer's Crossing Road. I want to congratulate you for a fine presentation. That was very, very well done and very informative. I attended all of the meetings that were held, informative meetings. I also would like to add the fact that I am in the real estate business. I'm aware of costs. I also hold a license as a certified general contractor, had numerous hours in estimating related to construction. All I can say is, and by the way, I was a member of the Swanzey Fire Department back in the late 60s and early 70s. I know that's giving away my age, but anyway, the time has come to address this problem that we have with our fire department, and I can't think of anything more important than fire protection, and anything more important than proper training for our police and fire. When I moved to Swansea over 50 years ago, we had a volunteer fire department. I mean, the first guy that showed up drove the truck, and the rest of us, we tried to get there and do the job. But anyway, aside from all of that, I really studied the plan. I asked a lot of questions at the meetings. One of the things I would like to throw out is mentioning is the building is structurally sound enough so that if we ever needed to add a second floor for future uses of the town, whether it be town hall use or whatever it is, you know, the building was extremely well designed, and the cost estimates came in, I think, right on the money. So it's the time to make a decision and get it done. So I hope, hopefully, that you'll support this bond issue so we can move forward. Thank you.
While we see who wants to talk next, I just wanted to mention, it doesn't come through on this plan too much, but in terms of Greg mentioned possibly expanding up, there's also an opportunity here where we've left a space on the plan available. If at some point we need additional space for other uses, there is an area that's, like I said, segmented off. There's nothing built there, but there's no parking or anything, so there is a possibility for expansion, but it's not for uses we have now, so we didn't design for it at this point, but it does have that flexibility. Any other questions, comments, complaints? Seeing none, Mr. Chairman, do you want to close this public hearing?
Absolutely, great comments, we appreciate them. Thanks very much for your support. We really echo and the sentiment that Greg put out. We've been trying for 5 years to bring a much needed, updated facility to the town, and we feel that this is the best plan. There's been a tremendous amount of coordination amongst the principals, all the focus meetings, and all of you who attended them. We greatly appreciate that. We hope that you'll reach out to 10 of your neighbors and encourage them to vote yes, come to the polls, and finally put this to bed. The issue for us, regardless of what was discussed with regard to cancer, the three of us were incredibly impacted by the information that was provided to us from actual firefighters who are dealing with the onset of cancer that was presumed to be caused by their work as firefighters. And it made that much more important that we had, when Michael had the slide up, that we had the division where the hot zone, where people could bring in their uniforms from being on the job, turn them in, have them washed in a facility with appropriate laundry equipment, extractors, as opposed to the Maytags that we, or maybe they're Sears, I don't know what brand we have now, but they're clearly not extracting the impurities that these men and women face when they go out. But this new facility will address that. And it will keep those contaminants at one end of the building, where we'll be able to maintain the building and its cleanliness and protect our firefighters, as well as members of the public who are coming in to meet. So again, we appreciate that you came out, we appreciate your comments, and we greatly appreciate your support. If we could get 61%, it would be tremendous. So we'll close the public hearing.
Thank you. And then we'll open a public hearing on the budget and
No,
spending.
we'll open the public hearing on the remainder of the warrant.
Yes, sir.
But remember who your bosses are.
Yes, sir. With that, on to the next one. So next after Article 3, which we just talked about, is Article 4. The Board of Selectmen recommended our operating budget, which is just over 6.3 million. It's down 3.1%, 200,000, but there's a caveat, so it is down, but I'll explain why. And the recommended budget is about 230,000 higher than the default budget. So if it's down, why is it higher than the default budget? We'll get to that. So major increases, debt service is one of the areas. As you know, the voters approved last year a road bond for $3 million. So we've only borrowed half of that so far, but we're showing the debt service for that and other loans that the voters have approved. The police department continues to try to address staffing needs with part-time, non-benefited positions. So their increase reflects additional use for that as a part-time investigator position. Highways continuing to struggle with the expenses related with winters, storms that never end, and ice storms. So there's some money for salt. There's also some money to kind of bridge paving another road next year. So we have a few roads on the maintenance side of paving. So those are the main increases there. The recycling center has a very lean staff, again, largely based on part-time dedicated folks. We have only 2 full-time staffers there. And what we're hoping to do to provide a little more stability is a seasonal full-time position there in the summer. So that's their increase there. Fire department, again, another part-time staffing item. So they're looking to have some weekend coverage to help when a lot of their volunteer or call members are out spending time with their families, so they don't necessarily have to be on call at all times. So if there's a routine medical call, some of the folks that are on the weekend staff will be able to help. This is kind of a pilot program, so we'll see how it works. It also has some money for vehicle maintenance. We had a pretty significant maintenance issue in one of our trucks that we had to resolve, so that's part of the increase in their budget as well. It happened right around the end of the year. Personnel administration and insurance are up. Those are mainly employee-related expenses, so health insurance, property and liability insurance, and elections are also up. 2020 presidential election, we have the primary, the local election, the state primary, and then the general election. So we're up from the one election we had last year. And I should mention in your handout, in addition to these PowerPoints, you have a summary of the budget sheet, so you can look there. I'm only kind of focusing on the highlights, but there's more information in there. There's also a copy of the capital reserve funds that the town has when we get to that. Major decreases, so economic development, we've been working with a marketing company to help try to market some commercial properties in town, so we're kind of in a different phase of that. So we had put money in last year, and we're going to be able to reduce that a little bit, but continue the effort. Revaluations had seen an increase, I think, last year based on utility assessment legal battles with Eversource and Fairpoint. We have resolved those, so we were able to take out that money. Streetlights, a few years ago, we did an LED program and also removed some streetlights, so we're continuing to kind of account for the savings there. And then the big factor, as a lot of you know, earlier this year in May, the town closed the Carpenter Home as an assisted living facility, so that's really the single biggest impact on this budget. It's why the budget is down, is because we're not showing those staff and different expenses that were related to the Carpenter Home. Now, we're also not showing the projected room rental that we were getting for renting it out, so it's largely a wash, but it does mean that that's a large reason of why the budget is down. So the default budget is the same budget as last year, with increases for either contracted or legal obligations and decreases for basically expenses that aren't expected to continue. So I've been advised that the closure of the Carpenter Home means that should not be in the default budget, so that's why both the default and recommended budget are down. So the default budget is actually $430,000 lower than last year, again because of that, essentially because of the Carpenter Home closure, and it's also lower than the 2020 recommended budget. The increases and the decreases in the default are basically the same as some of the other factors in the regular budget. So there's debt service, elections, and then the Carpenter Home. So overall operating budget decrease, again, mentioned this before, from 2019 is down about $200,000. But the general fund portion, which doesn't include the Carpenter home aspect, or the sewer budget, is up about 6.3%. So about over 100 of that is the debt service, and then some of those other factors that I mentioned. Net revenues look like they're down a lot, but again, it's largely because of the Carpenter home. We often didn't actually collect what we projected for revenue either, so once we get through this kind of hump of adjusting down, I think in the long term, it's gonna be a net positive financially, but we just have to make that adjustment this year. And so the amount to be increased by taxes, roughly equivalent to the increase, roughly equivalent to the 6.2%, just over $3.1 million there for an increase of just under $200,000. And the approximate tax rate impact of this article alone is about $5.06. And just in terms of proportions of the overall budget, sometimes folks find this helpful. Fire department's cut off at the bottom, that's 8%. You have this chart in your handout, but and then just to kind of give some perspective, if you're wondering, what do you pay for these different factors? So in 2019, you had a property worth $200,000. At the current tax rate, your total tax bill was about $5,150. Of that, 22% was the town portion, and this kind of gives you a sense of how much you were paying towards some of those departments. So if that's helpful, you pay $70 towards the recycling center, 93 towards the fire. So just to try to give some degree of perspective. And that chart shows some of the major kind of areas where it shows the increases and the decreases. So again, the big one, Carpenter home down there. And the revenue equivalent. And the big one, Carpenter home change. So. And we show some of the, and that's where that state revenue that was in 2019 and 2020 is shown there. And the fund balance that we talked about earlier, we've gotten down. So net revenues and expenses are both being adjusted down again, largely because of that Carpenter home change. Yes, Bruce?
Hi, Bruce Baker, originally from East Swanzey. Is there any plan for the Carpenter home? What's progression of it right now?
So the quick version is we had a committee this fall, which I think most of the members, if not all, are in this room. They reached out to a number of area, I'll call it social service or health organizations, because they wanted to try to get an established organization to try to run some sort of program up there, so it wasn't on the town government to run. We were largely unsuccessful in the fall, but we've actually kind of in the next phase of it over the holidays, and since then we've got I think 3 or 4 different organizations that are in various states of interest. So over the next month or so, I think we're going to get those all flushed out and then bring the committee back together, probably with the selectmen, and have all these folks make their kind of pitch. And then I think, with some luck in the next few months, we might have a tenant up there, hopefully doing some good work. Yes.
Beth Poulin Smith, Homestead Highway. What kind of social organizations are you speaking of?
That we reached out to or that
Yeah.
are interested in? So,
That are interested?
so, someone else want to help me with the list? I know it was Richard. You were on. Richard Scaramelli was on the committee. I'll let him do some talking.
The committee approached every major social service agency in Cheshire County and beyond, asking for recommendations, ideas, suggestions, and very open-ended requests for it. And we had some suggestions, but the committee finally wound up with one credible candidate, and that agency, that individual did meet with the selectmen, and I guess, I don't know the status of.
Still being considered.
Yeah, still being considered. But the real answer to your question is that we reached out as broadly and as widely as we could, asking for recommendations, without naming names.
Right.
Just rest assured that we
Okay.
tried to cover the waterfront.
Okay, great, thank you.
So any thoughts, questions, comments on the overall budget or revenues, Carpenter Home? Seeing none, I guess we'll continue. So Article 5, this is one of two articles that contributes funds to the town's various capital reserve and expendable trust funds. So we have a capital improvement program committee. Again, several of the members are in this room with us tonight. They review all the requests from different departments for trucks, buildings, equipment, other expenses that meet a certain threshold. They then review them, pace them out over the 6 years, and come up with recommendations for how to fund them. So that's a combination between these sorts of funds, one-time purchases, bonds. So I think you'll see this one, this article is down a good amount, and then the other article that's broken into two is up a good amount. So some of it I think is just depending on which item, the different accounts, which article they fall in. The other thing is, as the debt service increased, we talked about that was one of the increases because we're bonding for things, we're not saving up for them necessarily. So that means we're putting less into these capital reserves. So there weren't many increases. The main reductions are to the Wickham Hall Fund. Through fundraising and grants, they've been able to meet the needs of that project, which is going to be breaking ground in the next month or so. We had planned on doing $90,000 last year and up to $90,000 this year, and we don't need to do anything this year because of the generosity of different funders. So that's great news that that's down. Town hall improvements, I think that's, again, anticipating potentially bonding for something at the town hall, maybe some point in the future, so versus saving up for it. Carpenter Home, we had a trust fund to show the kind of loss that we projected, so we don't need to show that loss. All the expenses will be covered from the Carpenter Home Trust Fund. And then revaluations, as all of you probably know, we did a reassessment this year. Everyone got new values. So we do those every 5 years, and this last one was where they try to get into and visit every home. We're proposing to do just a statistical update where they visit properties that sell and then basically just update the math because we think the physical data is pretty good. So that has a savings to it, so we don't have to put away as much to save up for that. And the tax rate article the tax rate for this article for that $147,000 is about 23.5, 24 cents. Seeing no questions or comments on that. Oh, question, Bruce.
Yeah, Bruce Taker again. The county just issued it's in the process of issuing a bond, and we were quoted 2.08%, and I notice this is over 3.5%. Is that a direct result of how much? Does how much you have in reserves affect your bond rate?
No, because Swanzey doesn't have our own individual bond rating. We go through the New Hampshire Municipal Bond Bank, so all towns that, they bundle all different towns and school districts together and bond those collectively. So I know we showed, because that's what they quoted us, 3.75, but I think I just got an announcement this afternoon that their last bond sale for a 20-year bond was like 2.5%. So we use the number they gave us because that's the number they gave us, but I think it's high. But no, we don't have an individual bond rating. Continue. So this is, like I said, kind of the next half of that contribution to the capital reserve fund. So you have a sheet that has them all on the same page as well. That's not broken up. So these ones are mainly focused on DPW and highway related purchases. So like I said, the last one was down a good amount. This one's up a little bit. So the main increases on this one are DPW equipment and road rehabilitation. So we had the road bond, and as part of kind of that long year finance plan, part of the funding is also going to still come from the capital reserve. We were able to drop it down last year, but we're just going to work it back up a little bit to keep up with inflation and the high costs that we're seeing on construction projects. And so for this 375, the tax rate impact is around 60 cents per thousand. So this one's a little different. So this is separate from those articles that we just talked about. We're proposing to spend $225,000 from the undesignated fund balance for updates to the town's tax maps and purchasing of a GIS system. The town's tax maps, which are, I think, the original tax maps for the town, date to the 1970s. They're based on flyovers at the time. They have significant inaccuracies. We routinely come up with lots that we don't show an owner for, lots that don't really exist. The boundaries are inaccurate. It really runs into a lot of problems for different developments. So it's a big number and it's a big expense, but at the end we'll have updated tax maps, a GIS software that'll be on our website. Even towns like Peterborough have it on their websites. Keene certainly does. So I think it's a big cost, but I think it'll be well worth it. Anyone, like I said, who's worked with our tax maps have probably run into a, what the heck is going on here? So I think it'll be a good benefit at the end. The reason we're funding it this way is it's a multi-year project. And if we put it all in the capital reserve fund to have it available, we'd have to spend it all now. If we just pace it out over these 3 years, from an accounting perspective, it works out well for us. So. Scott?
Scott Self with Swanzey. Do you happen to know if the GIS includes the location of water lines and sewer lines when they're going to be doing that?
Yes, we would have a module for that as well. As our sewer operator, do you think that would be helpful? Yeah, and so when someone came in and said, hey, where are the sewer lines? We'd be able to just click on a tab and all those sewer lines in different parts of town will be able to pop up. We can turn them off, put on water lines. I think it's going to be really helpful. Christian Hill Road Bridge. So as a lot of you, especially in Scott's part of town, probably know, that bridge has been closed since 2014 for, at the recommendation of the state due to critical deficiencies. It runs over the Ashwelot Rail Trail. We're expecting to have it constructed in 2022 or 2023, potentially sooner. We've been wrangling with the state over how high they're going to make the bridge because of the rail trail under it. We've gotten them to see the light and realize that even according to their reports, there's really no likelihood that the trains are going to come back to that area. No, seriously, this was a year-long debate with them. Initially, they wanted us to raise it, then they wanted to keep the same height. We've got them to go down, so I think that cut the cost like in half. So that news came recently and was good. We also had a committee back in 2016. I was on it along with a few of my colleagues that reviewed kind of the different options. Did that bridge make sense? Was there something at a different intersection that we could do? And believe it or not, with 80% of the money coming from the state, fixing the bridge is really the most cost-effective solution. Even though the detours aren't that far, we really looked at different options. We have engineers on board. They'll continue to look at different options. We'll have more public informational meetings about it. And because it's coming from a capital reserve fund and a state grant, there's no direct tax impact. Paul?
Paul Sherring, Bridge Road, North Swansea. Why the delay in construction? If we're going to have the money by the end of this year, theoretically, why wait till 2022 or 23? So
it's based on, in part, when the state funds their share of it. So we're in their program. Their program is spaced like 10 plus years out. We could potentially build sooner because it has been closed. They do have an exception for that, but we'd have to front the money. So we'll just have to kind of figure out timing wise, and the engineering work, we need to get that finished. So it's possible, we'll be done the engineering work this year. Maybe we'll decide to do it next year, but kind of have to figure out exactly when the state has that money budgeted, but that's the other factor.
Thank you.
Oh, Bruce?
I can speak up again. Back where you had the road reclamation and that section, dollar amounts, how much of that is attributed to the $5 or $10 surcharge on our registrations, and where is that money going?
So that's a, yeah, a $5 motor vehicle surcharge. The state's been trying to increase the local option to 10, but it's still at 5. That, because it's appropriated at basically as everyone does their registration, we don't put money in at town meeting. It goes in every month. I think it generates about $50,000 or $60,000 a year. Teresa's nodding, so. And we've used that recently on Eaton Road. I think part of it, we've used it on engineering work. We use it for some different sources.
But it's all on road.
Yes. We thought about using it for rail trails and you reminded us not to, so that's why we're gonna get there, I think, next, actually. So, yeah, no, that was specific for roads and bridges. Good segue. Rail trails. So the town applied for it in 2018 and received a competitive transportation alternative grant program to improve the remainder of the rail trails. So as a lot of you probably know, the northern part of the Ashwellet Rail Trail has already been improved. So this project for about $815,000 would be to finish the rest of the Ashwellet Rail Trail and improve really the whole section and even a little bit of the trail into Marlborough for the Cheshire Trail. The town share, we're voting again from that fund balance, partly because it's several years out, but also partly because the town's Rail Trails Advisory Committee is planning to be aggressive with fundraising and looking at different grants. So again, we don't want to raise that money from your taxes if we're hoping to get it from another source. But by approving it at this point, we can get going on the engineer work and kind of like the bridge project, get in the queue, be ready to go. And hopefully we can, begin soon. We did select an engineering firm and they're going to be getting started shortly. So I know we have members we did have members of the Rail Trail Committee. I don't know if anyone wants to speak about that. Bruce is nodding, so we'll go with no. But no questions or anything on that? So school resource officer, you might be wondering, why are we talking about a school resource officer at the town meeting? Well, a couple of reasons. One, it would be a town of Swanzey part-time employee. $30,000 is roughly the half-year cost, and it's planned to be primarily funded by the Monadnock Regional School District. We've had many years of conversations, as a lot of you, if you're interested in the school business, know we used to have a school resource officer, then it went away for a few years. We tried to bring it back. The town supported it, but the school district did not. I think we're seeing positive reports coming out of the school that there's support for that this time. They do have a civilian school safety officer, and so part of this will be to allow him to go out to some of the out schools, while the school resource officer will be a sworn, again, part-time Swansea police officer. Will be able to stay primarily at the high school. And obviously a lot of it's about safety, but it's also really to foster positive relationships between the students and the police, have a police officer in their school, get to know their people too. And just, I think it has a lot of benefits. Again, we think we have support from the school district, been working with the administration. So because it's mainly funded from the school district and then a little bit from the fund balance, there is no direct tax impact. I know we have some friends from the school district here. I don't know if anyone wants to speak at all. No? Any questions or comments on that? I think it's in the school budget is the last thing I heard, so I don't think they're gonna have a similar article like this, but this is how we chose to do it. Bruce, anything on this one? So Article 11, a little bit different, so we're kind of out of the projects, and this is a commercial and industrial, commercial, I guess I got commercial twice, no one caught that typo. Tax exemption. So how this one will work if it's approved is if, say, we'll go with a new factory or some manufacturing business wants to come into Swansea and build a $2 million building. They can apply, and it would be up to the selectmen to approve up to a 10-year and 50% tax exemption on, again, commercial and industrial property. So if that $2 million building, they might be able to receive up to $1 million for 10 years off their assessment. So not $1 million payment or anything, but off their assessment. And the selectmen would review those applications and try to determine, based on the language of this article, if there's a public benefit, which might be job creation, building a factory would add tax revenue, improving properties, maybe like an old mill building potentially that needs rehabilitation. Someone has to put a lot of investment into that. You know, we don't want them to necessarily get hit with a big tax bill right away. So certainly up to the voters. It's an interesting idea. It's a new, or it's been amended to give us a little more flexibility. So it's something we wanted to pursue. As you probably know, your selectmen are very economic development focused. We have an economic development committee. It's something they prioritized, continuing to add commercial and industrial base. So this is one of the options we have to do that. Seeing no questions or comments. So this one we talked about last year. We'll probably, hopefully, cruise right through it. It's not a spending article, but just to mention it. There's a Class 6 non-maintained road behind the old Naughty Pine property. We're looking to discontinue that. The road is kind of obsolete now that Route 10 was relocated. So 2019 town meeting had an article. It was amended to study the issue. There were some questions between the property owners. That's been resolved. So we're hoping to get this checked off once and for all. So the planning board had a public hearing, I think last week, to discuss the housing standard ordinance. Based on that public hearing, some of the discussion, the staff is planning to request the selectmen withdraw this article and develop a different use, the way that focuses more on rental properties only. So I don't think you'll end up seeing this one on the warrant. We'll talk more about it next week. So motor vehicle side, this is, these next few are, oh, never mind, scratch that. So motor vehicle side, so Swanzey became a designated Purple Heart community last year. And so this was a new law that passed that we became aware of, so it's something we wanted to put before the voters to waive the motor vehicle registration fee. I think it's just one for any folks who were prisoners of war, received a Purple Heart, or survived Pearl Harbor. So we think we have, I know some folks did some counts of people who are currently in Swanzey who had a Purple Heart. I think it's maybe, you know, you can count them on one hand, so it's not a huge number of people, but it is something we wanted to recognize and put out there. So seeing no comments or questions. So this is again just local option, just putting an option before you in case you're interested. Swanzey approved Keno last year. I know we have at least one establishment that has it. Somewhat along the same lines, again, certainly a local option if you have interest in it or not, but the state changed the law to approve sports gambling within the state, so you can do it online now, and there's also going to be, I think, a set number of physical locations. So you know, it's possible with Swansea's proximity to Mass and Vermont that someone might want to open such a business here. It certainly wouldn't guarantee it if this passed, but again, with that economic development focus, just trying to give as many options out there as possible. Seeing what folks think about it. And then we have a couple petition warrant articles related to veterans tax credits. So this first one is for folks who have a service-connected total disability on a residential property. Right now they get a $2,000 tax credit, and the petition was to increase it to $4,000. We have about 25 of those now, so the estimated cost per year is about $50,000. And we don't necessarily always think about tax credits or exemptions in this way, but I just want to point out to make sure people are aware, it's essentially equivalent to a $50,000 expenditure being added to the budget. So it would have a tax rate implication of about 8 cents per thousand for this one. I don't know if we have any of the petitioners here necessarily that want to speak to it. Samir? You want to speak to it, Samir, or?
American Legion in Swansea and Veterans of Foreign Wars and other groups discovered that we are less than all the surrounding towns. All the surrounding towns in the Bible veterans with this particular higher, it's 4,000, other places even higher than that the state allows to happen. And Swansea is one of the towns that did do that. And so American Legion veterans got together, and we put out a petition to the right of people to say we need to correct that. And make sure that those who are 100% disabled, I happen to be one of them, that wasn't the point. Those who are 100% disabled will get that and will be delighted to live in the great city of town of Swanzey, where we indeed do a lot of other good things for the town as veterans. And we strongly support the city, now that it's a Purple Heart city, which is a very exciting thing to be able to drive to town and see that sign, the oldest medal of the United States of America for our heroic people. So I think that's a wonderful thing to do, and I hope you support it. I hope we get the signs soon, right?
I think they're on order. Gotta wait for spring to put them up. And kind of along the same lines, the next article also submitted by petition. This is for the general veterans tax credit, so either optional or all veterans credit. So currently the town offers $250 tax credit. The petition is to increase that to $500, and the total estimated cost of that one is about $77,000 per year. So it's about 12 cents on the tax rate. So about 20 cents between the two of them, the 8 and then the 12. So what does this all mean? So the overall amount to be raised by taxes, I'm going to specify the selectmen warrant articles first, and then have the petition articles below. So if all the selectmen articles, including the fire station bond, were to pass, it'd be an increase to be raised by taxes of about 6.9%. Or an estimated town tax rate of $6.22 per thousand. If the petition warrant articles also pass, that adds another 20 cents, which would bring it up to about a 10% increase. So between the petition warrant articles and the recommended, it's about a 10% tax rate increase projected. And so for a $200,000 house, what that means is it would be an increase of about $124 per year. So with that, that's all I got. Richard?
Richard Scarabelli. Michael, first of all, let me thank you for a lucid presentation. I second Greg's comment. This has been very helpful. And I congratulate the selectmen for their money-saving efforts as well. A procedural question. If one wanted to raise a comment about capital reserves and expendable trusts, is this the appropriate moment, or would you recommend waiting until deliberative?
So is it about adding a new one or
Yes.
changing an amount?
Yes.
That would be tonight.
Okay. May I ask that the chair to recognize the president of the Mount Caesar Board of Trustees, please?
I'm Mary Wood. It was an oversight that our budget committee did not ask for $3,000 normally that we get into our budget for the expendable trust. Is that available to restore that to our budget?
This is your opportunity to make the case, and then the selectmen would finalize the warrant at their meeting next week. So if you want to speak to maybe potentially what that
Well,
could be used for.
that's our reserve fund that we use for.
Mary, if you could speak up, we've got a noise behind us
Oh.
that it's hard to hear.
Did you hear any of that?
A little bit.
It was an oversight that the budget committee failed to request our normal $3,000 that we normally get in the budget for the expendable trust for the library. So can that be restored for this budget, for this year?
We'll take that under advisement. Yeah, we'll talk about it, and
Okay.
yeah, we'll let you know next week.
Thank you.
You have another?
I'm Jane Johnson, and I would like to speak in favor of the Swanzey Preservation Society and the local Grange Hall. There has been a local assessment done that says to stabilize the Grange Hall so it could in the future be worked on, because it is sitting there deteriorating by the year, and if we don't stabilize it, we won't have anything to work on. I would like to propose that the selectmen consider an article on the warrant asking for funds to stabilize, and the assessment was $15,000 to $16,000 that's needed to fix some of the deterioration so it can be worked on.
I think that's to kind of keep the weather from getting in the building, make
Right,
some
right, because
modest.
the water and the storm, winter wear and tear, and it hasn't been painted for a number of years. It is a town building, and I think it doesn't speak very well for our town when people drive by on Route 32 and see a deteriorating building sitting there that belongs to our town. It isn't very inviting. I would like to see it taken better care of, and eventually, the Swanzey Preservation Society has been working to raise funds and has had a partial grant to help with the architectural study that was done by a local architect in Keene. And the town and the Swanzey Preservation Society have done this far. And I feel it's important because I think the history of our town is important to the future of our town. They need to know what was here in the past. And in the 1800s, I believe it was 1886, Goldenrod Grange 114 was organized and chartered by the National Grange, and it was a social and economic backbone to Swanzey in the agricultural community and the lumbering, and then later on represented these people in making sure they got fair prices for shipment of their goods to other places. So it is a marker to a time in our history that was very important to our progress. And I think we could probably find some good use for it in the fact that our town is growing rapidly, and we're not asking for a fancy building or a lot of pomp and circumstance. The Grange was a very basic, common society that wanted a place for the community to be supported. And in 1902, their membership in Swanzey had grown to meetings of 100 to 125 people. This is recorded in our history. And they have served many dinners, not that we would be serving dinners there now because people don't really go out much for church suppers, and, well, they do in Swanzey, but they don't want to compete with the church suppers.
Best meal in town.
But you suffer. But I think it's an important part of our community, and that we should pay attention to it and preserve it. Thank you.
We don't usually get this kind of a turnout at a select board meeting, so given.
Like ever?
Given that you're here, this has really been a dilemma for us. Not just our board, but previous boards going back to the, was it 92 or when the town purchased the property from the Grange, which is essentially what do we do with the building? And there's a very passionate group, Jane obviously is their spokesperson, who wants to see restoration of the building. We did take on restoration of Whitcomb Hall, and we did that mainly, or in large part, due to the volunteers who assured us that they would be able to generate the grants and the donations, which they've done, to cover approximately 3/4 of the cost of the renovation. So what we would really appreciate, whether you give us comment tonight or you communicate with Michael or one of us on the street, is your feedback with regard to the Grange Hall. I know as a board, we'll be very reluctant to take it on if we're not assured that there is a group committed to raising a substantial portion of the funds necessary to restore the building. We do support Jane's request to have this added as a warrant article. One of the main reasons that we support that is it gives the broader community, not us, but the broader community, the opportunity to weigh in and give us some guidance and let us know how you want to proceed. As Jane mentioned, there may be opportunities for the town to utilize the building. Right now, we don't know of any, but that doesn't mean that there aren't any. But we strongly encourage you to give us your feedback if you want to make a comment now in favor or not, please do, because we truly are open to any comments and suggestions that people make. Yes, ma'am.
Janet Carroll, I live on Summer Street. My husband and children and I are new to Swansea. For the last 20 plus years, I've been involved in historical administration throughout the state and support what Jane is doing. And I think one of the reasons why we chose to move to this town is the historical character, the sense of place that comes with along with these structures, these buildings that are part of history in this community. So I would really support that motion. My family and I would support any efforts made to preserve it.
Bruce? I would like to support that also. I'm Samir Habibi, I live on 24 Sawyers Crossing Road, with Bert, speak for Bert. I think the beauty of the town is by what you see. Look what Whitcomb Hall has done to that part of town. For those of us who live in the center, we never thought that area of town would be as attractive as the center, right? Simply because of the buildings and what it was. And Whitcomb Hall has done that for the town. When you drive off that bridge, you see that nice park below there now, and you go across there and you come and see Whitcomb Hall. Same thing when you drive into town. You see the library. It's a historic building, very famous historic building. It's a beautiful, attractive building. It attracts people. The Grange Hall, as you drive by and see the train feeling, you wonder what on earth has happened here. And obviously, if it's beautified, can be utilized. There's all sorts of things one can do with it. I'm sure the city can find committee meetings to hold over there. It's easy to walk across the street and go somewhere else, right? So it's a good thing to do. And for the town to have that charm, when we spoke about just a little while ago in the fire stations, and one of the meetings I said how important it is to have the town look lovely. It attracts people to stay, to build, to improve, and beautify. And that's very important, isn't it, for all of us from a tax point of view, right? So I strongly support that. And I hope we can give it a good consideration.
Just a couple of points. We're in favor of this initiative being placed on the ballot. We're not disputing that. But one clarification, the estimate of just under 16,000 does not include exterior painting of the building. It's designed to stabilize the building and to do what we can to preserve the integrity of the structure. Anybody else? Bruce?
Is that building on the historic building? Is there any funds come from the state as far as?
Yes, and then we received a grant from, what was it,
New Hampshire Preservation Alliance.
Yeah, and that's what got us an architect study, almost architect study. And in that, bottom line, he said it was not a disaster, right, Joanne? You can speak to that. It was, that it's worth saving, you know, it wouldn't be impossible, certainly.
But you have to be in the certain parameters when you're doing it, so that you preserve its.
That's very entailed, if you're working with an LCHIP grant or some of them, you do have to follow their instructions, but that.
Joanne?
Joanne Strohstein, I'm not a resident of Swansea anymore, but my heart is here. Sadly.
State your town.
I live in Keene.
Thank you.
So, very good provisions. I am on the Swansea Preservation Society as well. I have been since its inception. I used to walk my dog by the building and thought we needed painting. That's really all I wanted. But then I got into it, Jane and the other people who are so dedicated. I just want to address one point, and that is what Bill talks about in terms of its usage. And I've been talking to people ever since we started this whole project. And I have talked informally to many people who said, we would love to have that building accessible to us. The the schools, Mount Caesar especially, has no place to have its kids do their plays. They've got an all-purpose room, and it really doesn't have the facilities for practice. Even the high school auditorium is closed off much of the year because they have practices there. That's where the band practices every day. So it's not something that's available to the elementary school. The gentleman, Bill Parkman, who runs the AP program, which I monitor every year, I proctor every year, would love to have a place where they don't have to close the library down every time there's testing at the high school. Its proximity to the schools, again, this is all informal, this is all, I would like to do it. I had the Cub Scout, one of the Cub Scout leaders approach me and said, when can we get into the Grange Hall? Well, right now, it's limited to 10 people, so you can't get more, and it's not heated, and it's not air conditioned. Really loving it, yeah. So there is interest out there. I got more than 100 signatures 2 years ago from people who committed to the idea of renovating the hall. So there are people out there that don't come to meetings, although I see several of them here tonight. They don't usually come to meetings, we're all busy, but they are interested, and they would use it. It's not going to be Whitcomb Hall, folks. We have no one, as a matter of fact, I think the rough estimate from our architect was just slightly more than Whitcomb Hall is paying to renovate their second floor. So it's not going to be a Taj Mahal, and Whitcomb Hall is beautiful, I love it. It's a gem. This is sort of a little gemlet.
In the rough.
Yeah, in the middle of Swanzey Center, to complement what they're doing with the library, what they're doing with the town hall, making it more, and it will be more accessible, as it said, easier to cross the street to get to meetings from the town hall if they need it. So it would also provide that. The architects have come up with some wonderful plans, designs for it already, some choices that we can make that include meeting rooms and offices, maintaining the stage area on the second floor. The plans are in place, and getting it stabilized so that it doesn't deteriorate any further is what we're looking for. I just want to get it painted. Thank you.
Sell brushes out in Hampshire.
There you go. It's the spray paint.
My name's Joe Smith, I live on Homestead Highway. I like to support what Jane and Joanne are talking about. But I also think that we need to come up with some dollar amount to slap that coat of paint on the building. I mean, it's one thing to stabilize the building, but if we don't have a coat of paint on it, it's gonna rot. It's a beautiful building. If you've never been upstairs, it is a grand auditorium upstairs with a stage. It is an absolutely gorgeous building. I think we should preserve it, but it does need that coat of paint. Thanks.
Jody? And Kathy?
Jody Turner, I've been a resident of the area all my life. I moved to Swanzey around about 11 years ago. And all my life, I've driven to Swanzey Lake and back and forth, and I always wondered, what the heck is this building here? And so I just wondered, how many of you have been in the Grange building? A lot. Okay, that's great, because I never had. And so about a year or so ago, I joined the Swanzey Preservation Society because I wondered, what is this sign up on the building and what does this mean? Well, this spring, or May or so, we had an open house at the Grange, and that's when I found out that we could only have 10 people in the building at a time. So it totally changed my point of view on what we were going to do with this open house, because we can only have 10 people at a time. But when I walked into that building and saw where the kitchen was, and where the downstairs was, and where they used to have all of the meals, and they would serve 250 people in one night when they had the old homestead. I mean, it is our history. And then upstairs, it's beautiful. If you guys remember, they have a nice screen, the curtain that is there. It's just beautiful. And if we lose this, and I say this all the time, if you heard me say it before, if we don't save this, it will be gone, and it will be gone forever. So what we're looking for is to have things buttoned up. And some of the things that we're talking about with the 15 to 16,000 is the electricity, not the full building, but just electricity so we can do the things that we need to do. Roofing up, shoring up, fire escape, fixing a few things on that. The doors, if you go by that, there's a door that is completely like open in the bottom. I'm sure that animals are going in there and it's not good for the building. And then maybe just having a few windows redone, because when you even touch anything, some of the windows are just falling out. So there's little things that we can do to save the building for right now, but what we are gonna need in the future, if this is what we're gonna do, is we're gonna need support from the community as well. Because this building, to me, is worth saving.
Kathy?
Kathy Habibi, Sawyer's Crossing, Swanzey. Many of you know I'm chairing the capital campaign for the library. This is because it's not ADA accessible. This is what started this whole thing. I am realizing that we could utilize also Grange Hall. Our summer reading program that we do for children, we've had to utilize the high school and we've utilized Whitcomb Hall because we could not bring the programs into the library because we are not ADA accessible. There's a lot of uses that could happen in this town. We are not going for a warrant article ourselves for the library. We're trying every kind of grant process possible. The community, we're reaching out to the community, which is stepping in and is really helping us. And we do, when we find in applying for these grants, they want to know that the community is behind us for anything. So for the Grange Hall or whatever, it's how many people in your community are behind this and are helping this. And all those little $25 and $50 checks we get all help and come with this. And I speak for this also because I think the library, it's a social center in our town. It really is. We have so many older people that come there and use this because they can't get Wi-Fi in their area, or maybe they can't afford the Wi-Fi. They come for heating and they come for air conditioning. They come for social. Many of our young people are now being homeschooled and they're utilizing that library. There's so many programs that can be offered to these students that could be offered there or across the street in the Grange Hall if we're ADA accessible. That's what it's all about, ADA accessible. We are old historic buildings, but we're trying to make them relevant for the community, and this is the center of our community. This is what we have here. So don't take out any more streetlights.
Anyone else? Scott?
Southwest Swansea, I'm also in favor of saving that building over there, and I don't think that $16,000 is too awfully much to put into stabilizing it, but I'm with him about putting a little extra in to paint the building. At least it'd be looking good and making people think that,
Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Linda Minichello, 82. Linda Minichello, 82 Goodell Avenue in Swansea. First of all, thank you very much for opening this up so that we can hear what the community has to say and for your support of this. As someone who helped collect those 100+ signatures, I can assure you that there is interest, and I agree 100% with Joanne that we may not hear from those people. They may not be here tonight. It is tough to find a way to follow up, even for the most well-intentioned. I just want to add that as a teacher here at the school, there are students interested in this project as well. Presently, we have a Monadnock senior who, following the activity of the Grange and the events of the town, she is writing blogs, she's working with us, she has her own initiative, and she has friends working with her, and so, there are academic benefits to this, but their eyes are on us, and, they're learning about community and what community values, and I think that, we're on the right path with this. And I just want to say that I hope that, I see the selectmen as in a unique position to check in with other, I don't know if this is the right word, departments, agencies in the town to see if they would, how would the town use it? We have a recreation department. Who could we reach out to see how we ourselves would use it? We have community groups, but how would the town itself use it? I think you're in a unique position to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Anyone else? I guess we heard the comment about adding additional funds to allow for the scraping and painting and repair of damaged clapboards. Just one word of hesitation on our part. We weren't able to get actual contractors to give us estimates for this $15,750 because I know one contractor in the room. He's very close to me. I know how busy he is, and all of the contractors are of that nature at this time. So it's not likely that we're going to have the opportunity to get an estimate over the next week or two in time for deliberative session, but we will make an effort to do that. Anyone else? Anything else? Close the public hearing.
Thank you all for coming.
We greatly appreciate you coming. We look forward to seeing you February 4th, right here, deliberative session.